Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Iblis Manifestations Podcast. This channel features lengthy off-limits conversations with various different artists and entrepreneurs, predominantly from the underground metal scene. We take deep dives into the topics of life, music, spirituality, and take insight from a variety of thought-provoking perspectives from personalities who you don't often hear from in a mainstream settings. I am your host, Cheyenne, and I was originally born and raised in Iran and currently reside in the UK. I am the frontman and founding member of the black death metal band Trivex, who have been active since 2009. The band originally started in the Islamic Republic of Iran, where such type of music is banned as well as a punishable offense. You can check the band's pages for any updates on tour dates as well as new music. I am also a personal trainer and an online fitness coach who specializes in people achieving the best versions of themselves physically and mentally. Having been someone who was once extremely out of shape and overweight, I find it to be my duty to be able to pass on the information and knowledge which I've gained to help others achieve the same transformation. The Iblis Manifestations Podcast also features a variety of solo episodes where I discuss personal experiences and anecdotes in a very candid fashion, covering everything from mental health, spirituality, philosophy, and even paranormal experiences. This is the Iblis Manifestations Podcast. To support it, be sure to subscribe to the channel and visit the link in the descriptions.
It's great talking to you, Cheyenne, really. And best of luck to your endeavors for this podcast. I think it's a great initiative.
You're my favorite person to talk to for interviews and stuff. So I love what you're espousing out here. I love the knowledge and the perspectives that you're curating through this, and I'm just so honored to be a part of it. Thank you.
As I told you, it was one of the most interesting interviews I've ever had, because we talk a lot more things than just music, and I really appreciated that.
I respect you deeply, and it's an honor to be here.
And friends, remember as always, better to die on your feet than to live on your knees. Enjoy the podcast. All right. Evening, Kit. How are you doing? It's really nice to have you on Iblis Manifestations. You good?
Nice to be here. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Amazing. It's absolutely my pleasure to have you on. You've only been back home for a couple of days off of the Dark Funeral tour, right?
That's right. Yeah, this is day 2 at home, so I'm still coming back down to earth.
Amazing. How did that go?
It went really well, actually, considering that it was 40 people across 4 bands, so kind of a big package. 2 nightliners, so it was a lot to take care of, and I was the only TM. So it was a heavy workload, but everybody was really great to work with. So it was my first run with Dark Funeral, and they couldn't have been better. So it went really well.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So I'm very impressed and also equally intrigued by kind of what it is that you do, because when you check out obviously Cult of Chaos Productions, there's like a million things that are going on, and I always I'm always happy to see that, as someone who does like to do quite a few things. I'm just genuinely quite intrigued. So I guess for anyone who's kind of unaware, should we maybe bring this to the basic, and then if you can just tell us a little bit about your background and how you kind of got started with Cult of Chaos to begin with?
Sure. Well, I mean, it was all kind of a series of coincidences that led up to this, as everything generally is. Sure. But I'm originally from Canada, and I grew up as a huge fan of music. It was kind of my life. I was promoting shows already as a teenager, but it never occurred to me that this was something I could make a living out of. I mean, I was going to be a lawyer or a diplomat or something like that, but I always had this passion. Then I moved to Germany when I was 19, once again, really coincidentally, and I ended up staying there. And from there, I just kind of started making more contacts, and it became apparent that this is something that I was pretty good at and something that I really like doing. And I just started getting more and more jobs, and it got to the point where I needed some kind of formal company structure. Cult of Chaos, we actually started, my partner Sylvia and I, we started in the pandemic as a merch company. So she was designing t-shirts, I was trying to sell them. We didn't really know what we were doing, but it was mostly to kill time when we didn't really have anything else going on. And so then after things started opening up again and I was touring more and more, then I had this kind of company structure to convert it into a production company. So I do mostly tour production, tour managing, and then I also have a booking agency out of that as well. So like you said, it's a little bit of everything.
That's amazing. I love hearing that. And you mentioned about the t-shirts. I was kind of checking out some of your earlier stuff as well. And you guys actually made a design about Datura, which I thought was pretty cool and interesting.
Yeah. So so we had in the early days, it was Sylvia and another Italian partner of ours who started with that. And I gave them kind of full creative control to create whatever they wanted. And they came up with some really amazing stuff. I mean, the cool thing is that I had never met these two women in person when we started this. It was actually a friend of a friend who said, hey, you would really like my girlfriend. Like, you guys should connect on Facebook. And then I saw her drawings and I said, hey, she would be really good at designing these t-shirts. So that's how we got together. Now, most of the tours that I've done in my career, I bring her along. She's also an amazing sound engineer. So our paths have really kind of grown together in so many ways. But yeah, back in the days, like when we started this in 2021, then they did all the designs and I was kind of doing the back office stuff, and it just really grew from there.
That's amazing. So Cult of Chaos has really only been around for a few years then. That's not, I mean, I guess in the realm of music industry and how fucking intense it is, that's probably a long time, and maybe perhaps it feels like a long time, but in the grand scheme of things, that's still very impressive that you're now basically doing tour managing for bands like Dark Funeral and Mayhem as well, if I'm not mistaken, right? Well, yeah. That's incredible. Wow. Fair play.
Yeah. So it was a pretty quick trajectory as well. This kind of stuff I'd been doing since I was a teenager. I was hanging around with bands in the local scene in Canada where I was from and helping them out here and there. They were like in their early 20s and I was 16, but the only one with the car. So I was the driver de facto. I couldn't even get into the shows. So I would wait outside in the car with a book or whatever, listen to some music while they played their show, and then came back outside and I would drive them to the next gig. So
right on.
It was kind of always something that I was doing, but it really didn't occur to me until the last 5 years that it was something that you can make a career out of. And yeah, it's gone pretty well since then.
Another thing to point out there as well is, obviously you're talking about making a career out of it, but even then you've actually done that, post-lockdown world, which is actually, and I guess it started around the time when we were still in lockdown when you started doing the designs and stuff. And at that point, I guess music industry was actually a very uncertain thing. I didn't know if I was going to play another gig again, I probably would have done it underground, illegally like I used to 10, 15 years ago in Iran. But, other than that, it's interesting that you actually got the idea, perhaps in a time like that where no one knew if they were actually going to play again.
Well, it was kind of because of that uncertainty that I felt almost emboldened to take this leap, because I moved to Stockholm just before lockdown. So it was December 2019, so 3 months before.
Right.
And I was waiting for my residence permit, for my 1-year residence permit. And it was supposed to come like March 20th, but then they just stopped issuing residence permits. It was already in the country. So I was kind of stuck here. I couldn't go back to Canada. I had been living in Germany at the time, but I couldn't go back to Germany either. So I was just kind of stuck in Sweden. I didn't really know what else to do, but I was very lucky because Sweden didn't go into lockdown. So I was able to make a lot of friends. I was DJing at a rock bar here in Stockholm. So I met a lot of people in the industry and was able to kind of grow my network. And it was kind of from seeing, especially lots of friends of mine who were crew, who were really impacted by the lack of shows. And so when we started Cult of Chaos, we in parallel started a nonprofit organization called Nordic Metal Alliance, and the idea that we had there was to raise money by selling the Cult of Chaos t-shirts to just be able to help crew like buy groceries, because for a lot of people in my circle that was really an issue, even just finding $200 to pay your rent or buy groceries. Like we just wanted to help people with that. I mean, unfortunately, it was a little bit more ambitious than we could achieve, but it was a really interesting learning process to start a nonprofit organization in Sweden, to start a company, to start working on all of this infrastructure that I ended up using a year and a bit later to actually start what is now my current company that I'm working with.
That's amazing. Yeah. It's nice hearing stuff like that, and like you said, it's there's a lot of mouths to feed, so you can put all of the pressure on yourself to do that, but it's still nevertheless cool. We actually did a similar thing back in it was right at the beginning of 2021 where we actually did I know everyone's like anti-live stream, and I get it, don't get me wrong, like I totally understand the reasons for it, but we actually did one from a venue called The Boom in Leeds. And in the process for that, we managed to raise a few thousand for them, but also like a couple of other venues in the country, in the UK, that were kind of under threat, because they all basically were, and for me it's really important to kind of maintain that, or at least be able to help our culture survive, really.
Absolutely.
Because it's like we're talking about an element of, let's say, like making a career or a living out of it, but all of that is secondary to the passion that comes first. Okay.
Yeah.
And for me, obviously, with where I come from as well, where you couldn't even see a single show legally, compared to then actually having grassroots venues there. I kind of understood that there's a lot of importance to those small little venues, because it's through bands practicing and playing with those smaller venues, building a local fan base and a foundation that they get to then go on to do bigger things and, I suppose, make a career out of it, as a musician, whatever the fuck that even means, but yeah, so it's really nice actually to hear that, and it's heartwarming, that at least that kind of intent and sense of community was there, because I always talk about this. I always say that when you go to shows and, let's say you were just saying that you were on a tour with like 40 crew members, when you're surrounded by like hundreds or thousands of people at festivals and gigs, you think that, metalheads are everywhere. They're not. We're still an extreme minority. And I think that's something that we kind of got to be sort of protective of in a way, Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think we live so much in our bubble too. And I'm realizing this more and more because, as a teenager in the scene, then I had my group of friends, and you always feel like in your hometown, that you're the weirdos, the outcasts. But then when you kind of grow up with this, and so many people grow out of it and they go and they get normal jobs and everything. So it's kind of strange to continue life in the touring world. And of course in university, I mean, I was still going to shows and everything, but I had a broader community than the metal community. But now just given given my lifestyle, most of the people in my circle are in this community as well. So it's really easy to forget that there's a broader world outside of the metal world. And it's kind of a shock when you step outside of it too. And you're like, wow, there are some people who don't totally understand this culture that we've built here.
Yeah, 100%. Me and my friends, we were actually just at this strongman gym in London the other day, and we actually recorded some stuff there that'll come out sometime soon. And that was exactly the case there, because it's the three of us, all completely used to this style of music, black metal guys, and we're in there for the same reason as all of the other guys there. But it was actually a mostly Muslim-run gym, okay. And I haven't had the best history with that religion or those people either, but yeah. It was kind of cool. It was kind of like, wow, like they don't totally get it, but then we're here focusing on this other thing, so it's kind of, it was actually all right. And they were actually really nice guys, so I have like nothing but good things to say about them, but it was an interesting contrast,
Yeah.
And yeah, like you said, like other people, you know, like to me, the thing that always feels like a slap in the face is watching reality TV or like what other people are watching on TV. It's like, you guys are living in a different world to to what we are, you know?
Yeah. And I was having this conversation with someone the other day. It's like, I can really relate to people with special interests. You know, it doesn't have to be music. It doesn't have to be metal,
Sure.
but I can relate to people who really burn for something, whether it's fitness or politics or something, just very passionate people. But if you're not passionate, that to me is like, okay, I don't get it. But it's really cool to be part of a community that's so passionate and to see lots of different sides of it too, to go from being a fan to working behind the scenes and working with these artists and to just kind of see the mechanics of the culture itself. And I studied cultural studies and linguistics in university. So to also kind of take that academic perspective onto the subculture is really fascinating.
Cool. Okay, then. So with that said, do you know how many passport stamps you've actually had on?
Quite a few. I couldn't tell you. I just renewed my passport recently, and I begged them to let me keep it because it's really quite a souvenir with lots of cool stamps.
Amazing. Yeah, I just only recently got a British passport, and thank you so much. I appreciate it. You know, it's nice. I'm looking forward to finally being able to travel. You know, and
yes, that is so much freedom too. It's a game changer.
It really is. It really is. You know, I mean, it was a nightmare. You know, I spent, I'm sure you've probably dealt with bands who had to maybe get Schengen visas and stuff, or even like going into the States. It's tough. It's a tough world. And
Yeah.
I've spent literally like thousands and thousands of personal finances just on getting like a short-term Schengen visa just so we can play a show at like a one-off small show in like Germany with my band and stuff, you know. But it's like you kind of do it for the passion and stuff, but it's nice not to have that kind of barrier there, you know.
Yeah, no, it makes a huge difference. And I was living in Germany from 2014 to 2019, so right during the refugee crisis. And the university where I studied, it had a really interesting program because in the country there simply weren't enough lawyers to be able to counsel all the people claiming asylum. So lots of the country's universities created a program where students could do an extra semester in migration law. So you could apply for this program and you did a semester, and then under the supervision of lawyers, you could actually counsel refugees preparing and applying for their asylum hearings. And so I got to participate in that, and I had a really interesting perspective into the whole visa immigration process from that side, even before working in the music industry. And when I was living there, I was spending a lot more time with Syrians than I was Germans for a couple of years. I was in a relationship with a Syrian guy, and so I could really see, like, man, when you have an Iranian passport or a Syrian passport, it's not like there's a wall around Europe. It's like there's a wall around you, and you are just so limited. It's such a tough situation to be in. But I mean, that experience, it definitely served me into being a lot more comfortable and confident navigating the immigration laws that I have to in my job now, but also gave me really interesting insight into this stuff that you're talking about now.
You actually put that so well. I love what you said, that, you know, you think there's a wall around Europe or whatever, but there's a wall around you. That's so fucking true. Like that's literally the last 13 years of my life, you know?
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, it really is. But now you can then understand, you know, like it's difficult enough being a musician, and then when you sort of combine the two, it's just like, you know, you're not supposed to be a touring musician, you know, when you're from that background, but, you know, fuck it, we'll do it anyway.
Well, props to you, man, for making it work and persevering.
Thank you.
Now you have a brand new shiny passport you can tour the world with.
There we go. That's the plan anyway. That's why I got it.
Yeah, great.
That's it. Amazing. So just coming back to your work as, basically everything that you do, because I don't think giving you one single working title is a fair assessment here. But let's say entrepreneur, okay?
Did you say that?
But just in your position, you're obviously dealing a lot with bands and artists, and bands and artists, you know, they obviously, especially in extreme metal, I always say this, they start playing and performing this style of music because they kind of need to, you know, that it comes from an unusual place of emotions and thoughts, you know, and then they're unique characters that have got something to say. And with that, it reminds me of that little sort of screenshot and the little caption from Filthy Taylor from Motorhead, where he says, "We're artists, we're fucking sensitive," you know? Yeah. And how important is your relationships with the artists that you work with in order to make this whole thing kind of come together?
I mean, you know, this is the deal breaker. In my position, you can't work with an artist unless they trust you. And this is the first thing. If I'm onboarding a new client, I can tell right away if they trust me or if they're skeptical, if they want to do things their way. Sometimes it's a bit of an adjustment, but you know, when you're guiding a group of people through unknown situations, and when you're advocating for them, and when you're the person really at the end of the day responsible for them, responsible that they get from point A to point B, responsible that they get paid, responsible that everyone is safe and that everything's working well, they need to trust you. So having a good relationship with my artists is of the utmost importance. If we didn't have that, then none of this would work.
Well, what are some of the challenges that would maybe arise from something like this, either early on or perhaps like during a process or like in a tour? What are like some things that you think that, I need to do something about that?
Well, one thing that can happen is, especially for artists who have been taking care of themselves for a very long time. And I see this kind of with smaller artists who are at the point where they're stepping up. And often it's usually kind of one person in the band who's been the driving force and they're doing everything. Maybe this is ringing some bells, but they're doing everything. They're taking care of the bookings. They're basically the manager. They're booking travel for the rest of the band. They're doing all of it. And then when it's time for them to level up and bring in a professional, either as a manager or a booking agent, then it can be a little difficult for them to let go of the reins. And it's a really sensitive process. You know, it's like sending your child off to school for the first time, you know, like you've done what you could, but now you have to let other people take care of it. So you can tell really early on if this is a transition that's going to work or not. Something that's really important is I need the artist to trust me, to know that I have their best interests at heart and that I'm going to do my job properly and to the absolute best of my ability. And I'm going to take care of everything that they've created to this point. But what doesn't work is when you have somebody really breathing down your neck and say, "Oh, well, I did it this way for the last 10 years. It's like, okay, but you know, you're at a different level now. We have to reassess how we do things. So that's something that can be a little bit tricky. And yeah, like I said, you can tell right away if it's going to work or not. And luckily to this point, I've had very good relationships with all of my clients. So it's been quite good.
That's actually excellent. I think I kind of needed to hear that, you know. So just so when you're saying that, you know, like, can you maybe make an example of how you would kind of reinforce, or like how would you show that artist that it's okay, you can step back, I've got this, you know? Obviously, you know, I understand it's a case of acta non verba, I totally get it, you know, but it's like, how do you mitigate that? Is there a way, like if someone has already made their mind about something, can you even change their mind with results, or are they just always going to be like that? Do you understand where I'm going with
Yeah,
that?
I mean, it can be a very slow process in some cases to change people's minds. Early in my career, I made the mistake often of just wanting to take over everything and just kind of saying like, okay, don't worry about it. I'm going to take everything from here. And I've realized that that's not necessarily the best way to do it with some people. I mean, I have some clients where they are very hands off and then they let me handle most of it, which I like. But then something that is really important that I've learned the hard way is that you really have to clearly delineate who does what. And so, for instance, if there's somebody who is really comfortable booking flights because that's what they've always done, and they're anxious about booking the flights, and this is just what they want to do because they feel better. They don't trust someone else with it. It's really okay for them to continue with this, even though I feel that I might have better insight into it. So the way that I might start is say, hey, look, you booked the flights. That's totally cool, but I'm going to send you the flight proposal, and then you can see what I would book, and then you go ahead and do it. And so just kind of to take baby steps like this, but you really have to have the sensitivity to see what the pressure points are and where people have a little bit more anxieties of letting go from their responsibilities to their band before they can just kind of step back and just be an artist and focus on the music, which is what I'm here to do anyway, is so artists can just do that part.
That's so cool to hear. Yeah, absolutely. And I think some artists as well, you sometimes, I guess, maybe have to step into their shoes. I mean, for me, for example, personally, I don't drink, but I know most people who play this type of music do. And I think that to them, a lot of shows are kind of a reason to party, or a reason or an excuse to want to do something like that. So it's like almost having like a little bit of extra time at the end of stuff, or like a little bit early this way, like even when you're talking about something like flights, I think that's something that probably goes a long way for a lot of musicians, I guess.
Yeah, and it's just the workload for musicians too. I'm constantly astonished at these artists who take so much on their own shoulders on top of playing the show. By the time the band hits the stage, like my day is basically done. There's very few things I have to do once they're on the stage, but I'm just exhausted. Like I've had the whole day of planning and making sure that everything is working properly and everything's on schedule and that everything's taken care of and there's no issues for the band to get on stage at that moment. I can't even imagine getting up there and then playing a 90-minute set after that. So it's just an extreme amount of work that artists put on themselves when they try to do everything themselves. And then of course there's going to be parts of the logistics that suffer, and that's exactly why there's people like me who take care of that side of things.
Absolutely, that's great. I'm glad people like you are out there doing doing the Lord's work, because the thing is as well, that you need to have a empathetic understanding of what the musician's going through, which I can see you clearly have. That's great. That's really refreshing to see that. And yeah, it's not easy, it could always be worse, but it's still, it's still difficult as it is, One thing, I had a bit of a crazy idea. I don't know what you think about this. I was talking to my fiance about this, and she was like, oh, you're crazy. But like, I had the idea, I was like, wouldn't it be just absolutely fucking great if you could tour, but the gig time was somewhere between like 12 and 3 p.m., okay? You would wake up, maybe go to the gym or something, and then get ready for the show, play the show, go and hang out with people afterwards, and then from 6, 7 p.m., just go inside, I don't know, maybe go to a sauna or something, and then just spend the night in quiet and go to bed at like 10 p.m. That would be perfect, right?
That'd be nice. I have to say, I had Mayhem was in Asia this past week, and their show in Kathmandu was like 5 p.m. or something, and it was hard curfew at 7 p.m.
Yeah.
And we were trying to figure out like why is it like this? And the only thing that the locals were telling us, there's problems with the police. There's problems with the police. So if you want that kind of rhythm, then go play some shows in Kathmandu. And
okay. Absolutely. I'll keep that in mind. What happened with their show in India? Because I think only a couple of the guys could make it, right?
Yeah, exactly. So there were some visa issues there, unfortunately. We really did everything we could to figure it out. I mean, I was on the phone 24/7 to talking to every Scandinavian diplomat in South Asia. It was crazy. But the only thing that we were told in the end after applying multiple times was that due to an issue on their previous trip, which I assume probably had something to do with the authorities not registering exit stamps, they weren't eligible for a visa that time. I mean, we have it on good authority that this will be able to be worked out, but it's going to take a few months to work it out. So yeah, just the visas just weren't coming through, and we kept pushing and pushing and pushing to the last minute. We sent them to the embassy in Kathmandu to get it worked out in person. And man, it was just wild because 3 of the guys didn't get their visas, and they were in the taxi, ready to go to the airport. I was waiting for the email to come with the visas so I could send it to the hotel reception, print this. Meanwhile, I'm doing all of this from the tour bus with Dark Funeral in Slovakia. So I'm not even there, but I'm trying to manage this whole thing. They have their stuff loaded in the taxi. I'm about to send the email, and then 2 of the visas don't come through. So right up until the 11th hour, and I have to give a shout out to the promoter in India as well. He was pulling all the strings he could, but
Salman, right?
Salman, exactly.
Yeah, I know him. Yeah, good guy. Great guy, actually.
And sometimes these things happen, and it's always heart-wrenching when you have to cancel a show, and especially in a market like India where the fans are really starved for bands like Mayhem. So we're doing everything we can to get these issues resolved. And I mean, Salman did everything he could. We did everything we could on our side, and hopefully we'll have some insight into exactly what the issue was. But we don't have so much information from the Indian authorities as of yet. But we're going to get to the bottom of it and make sure they get back there eventually.
That's one of those things that when you're at the peak of it and you're obviously working hard and trying to go through everything and make everything work, and that's one of those things that no one in the world will understand the amount of pressure that you might feel at that moment and how burnt out you might feel afterwards, right?
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, once that was done, we were all sad, of course, but it was just such high pressure for those 3 or 4 days when we realized we were getting down to the wire and the visas just weren't coming through, and they came through for everyone else, but then we just still weren't getting those 3. And so that was just I slept maybe an hour a night if I was lucky during those days. But it was a relief when that was over. But on the other hand, those are also the moments that I appreciate about my job, because I do work really well under pressure and then solving these problems. And of course, it's always interesting when you look back on it too. I never thought that I would rack up €100 phone bill and calls to Nepal trying to deal with this stuff when you have all these diplomats' phone numbers in my contacts now.
Sure.
It's every experience like this you learn for the next time, and then it just there's never a dull moment, that's for sure.
Absolutely. I know that you're obviously into yoga as well, right? Yeah. How important is that to kind of try and keep a sane mind going through all of this?
Oh my God. Yoga is the center of my life, honestly.
Yeah. Good.
It's become more and more a really important part of my life, and a tool that I use regularly to kind of just be able to stay on track. Unfortunately, when I'm on tour, I don't practice as much as I would like to, but when I'm at home, I practice every day, either at the studio or at home. I went to India last year to become a certified yoga teacher.
All right.
And that was a really great experience as well. But the most valuable thing that I learned in India, I think, was just the tools to be able to go into meditation, to be able to control my breath, to control my thoughts, and to just take a moment to recenter. So when things are really stressful and high pressure, then I can always come back to that center and find that again. So that's something so valuable that yoga has given me.
It's incredible. I actually was doing yoga this morning.
Really?
It was the first. Yeah. It was the first thing I did when I woke up today. It's not something I do very often, but I have basic knowledge of it, and I did 20 minutes around 7:15 in the morning. And then a few hours ago, I knew we were talking, and then it occurred to me, I was like, oh yeah, I can probably ask her about that. So are you a certified yoga teacher now?
I am. And, I don't teach here and there. Maybe I'll give some artists or crew a little yoga session on tour. But I would love to kind of have a more stable life, because then I could teach at a studio or something like that. But so it's a huge part of my life, and I would like to teach more on different opportunities. I'm exploring ways that I could maybe potentially do it online, but my plate is so full right now. To add another business venture would just not be the wisest thing at the moment. But I'm going back to India next week, actually, and I'm gonna come down from these crazy couple months and just do yoga for 3 weeks. So it's going to be really nice.
Oh, that sounds absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's just something about it, I mean, like for people who are listening, I'm a fitness coach myself, aside from being a musician and podcast host and variety of other things. And, I'm into obviously weightlifting and, bodybuilding, and that's kind of my jam, and more strongman stuff as well. As you can see on my forearm, it's about as red as a beetroot. Yeah, that's from the Atlas stones us and our friends were doing in that strongman gym I mentioned earlier. And so it's I like that kind of stuff. I like rough, heavy things, but yoga, I feel like sometimes kind of gets a bad rep, but it's so good, and it's actually really fucking difficult. Like people might look at it on a surface level and think, oh, it's this like hippie thing. No. It's great for you, and you feel so good afterwards. Like there's just like peace and calm that you feel, and stuff just even on a purely physical level, which I think is kind of, it's a shame to only focus on that side of things. But even if you were to only focus on the physical aspect of it, it just does so much to alleviate, especially if you're like sat down all day behind a computer, or if you're going on stage, and that guitar strap that you hang from you, that still weighs, so if you're stood there with this thing hanging off of you for like, I don't know, even 45 minutes to 60 minutes, and you're getting all hunched, that's going to mess up your back, especially your lower back. It's going to put a lot of pressure on there. So it's good to have stuff like yoga and weightlifting to kind of help alleviate that. I couldn't recommend it more.
Yeah. And the great thing about yoga is that there's so many different aspects to it. So there's really something for everyone. I came into yoga very skeptical of the spiritual side, and I was convinced I have absolutely no capacity to meditate whatsoever. My mind is always racing. So they're like, that's just not for me. And I did it because I had back pain. And then so I was doing more and more yoga to help with that. And then it just kind of became a habit that I would go to. And then I realized how useful it is for stress relief. And and it's just something that I keep going back to. And I've had lots of conversations with other yogis who tour. And I think there are so many benefits to integrating yoga into your daily routine when you're touring. My dream would be one day to have a tour where I don't have to be the tour manager. I get to be the yoga instructor. And so I just have to do I need to find a pretty big artist who has a budget for that, but wouldn't that be nice?
That would be amazing, right?
Yeah. But I really recommend, as you said, for artists and for crew, touring is extremely physical and it's very hard work. And, we don't talk so much about workplace safety in this industry as you would in some others. And so it's so important to take care of your body and your mind. And yoga is just the perfect way to do that on tour. You can do it anywhere. And it's so versatile, and there's really something for everyone.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is, you're preaching to the choir, this is totally, this is totally down my alleyway. I think that one element of this that I think a lot of people often forget, when we're talking about physical exercise and doing physical things, whether it's yoga or exercise or even martial arts, things like that. I think that a lot of people who don't partake in these things regularly, they just look at it as the physical. What they don't see is the positive impact it has on your mental health and on generally how you feel. More importantly, how you process things. Okay, how I think processing stress is something that isn't talked about enough. And, let's say if you're in a kind of high pressure situations, like the situation you dealt with India, or even just generally being on the road, or like, oh, the buses broke down, or are we getting there on time, or someone got pulled at the border, all these different things, or even other people just going through their day-to-day life, or like a customer was rude to them on the phone or something like that. I think there is a gift to the capacity of being able to handle stress. The way I look at stress is like kind of like it's water that you put in a glass or a container. And I think that the more physically fit you are and the more you exercise physically, that container becomes larger. Okay. Yeah. So it's less likely to then overspill when that water is kind of getting poured into it, and it's like, to me, I think emotions and stress and these things are it's almost like it's a physical thing that you have to process. And I think sitting there and that's why sitting there and thinking has never helped anyone in the history of the world, right?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You have to physically do something to make it work.
Yeah, no, exactly. And you know, that's another huge benefit and insight that I've gained from yoga as well, is that you're always kind of pushing your limit within reason, and you put yourself literally in these, which can be very uncomfortable positions, and then you just breathe through it. And the main thing is to keep your breath even and to keep your breath steady. And then this is something that you can take into your daily life as well. Like, no matter how uncomfortable things get, you just have to keep it even and just stay focused, and nothing is going to last forever. You're going to move into the next position in a second, and it's going to start all over again. So it's there's just so many life lessons to be learned from it, so many parallels from yoga and to the rest of life as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing you mentioned earlier, which I think is worth kind of touching back on and renoting, is when you first started it, you thought you were never going to be able to meditate because there's like too much noise or whatever, you know. And I think a lot of people get the wrong idea of meditation. It's like, no, let the noise happen, let it be there, you know, like just try not to, just keep breathing and try not to get overwhelmed. To me, that's kind of maybe a little bit more metaphysical aspect of breathing as well, you know. And it's something for anyone who's ever tried ayahuasca, you know, that breathing is extremely important, you know, because you just get overwhelmed with like a flood of interesting insight.
Yeah.
And the only thing that centers you is the breath. And then that teaches you a lot more about life itself as well when you go through it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Hell yeah. So you were saying that you also crossed the ocean on a boat. How was that?
Yes, that was a very wild experience too. That was, I had always kind of wanted to do that. I was always fascinated by this. And when I was living in Canada, I met a guy who came on a shipping container from Switzerland. And I was just really intrigued by this idea. And so for those who know me, you know that I can't pass up a good travel deal. So I saw this deal for 150 euros to cross from Guadeloupe to Italy on a cruise ship. And this isn't like working on the cruise ship or like sleeping down in the barracks. No, this was like in an actual suite, and you get 4 meals a day. And so it was the first cruise season after the pandemic. And I've never done a cruise before in my life. I didn't think that I would really like it. That's not really the way that I travel. I was in South America. I needed to find a way to get back to Europe. I had some time to kill, and I saw this opportunity. I was, fuck yeah, I'm gonna do this. So that was very interesting as well, to have some insight into that totally different world as well. And talk about subcultures, man, like those cruise people, that's a culture unto itself.
Interesting, right?
Yeah.
So what was it about it that was particularly different that kind of stood out to you?
Well, the thing about this one is because it was quite a long one. And so there were lots of really different kinds of people. And there's all these, a lot like metal, actually. There's kind of all these customs and rituals that people do on cruises. Like on the first night, you have to sit all together. Well, you have to sit together with your assigned group of people every night. And yeah, it was just stepping into a totally different culture. But what I loved about it was because I was traveling alone, it really forced me to meet people that I wouldn't have crossed paths with before. And then you really kind of get to know people's stories as well. The boat, I think it usually takes 4,000 people, but it was at like a quarter capacity. So it was maybe less than 1,000 people on board. And so when you're on the ocean together for 2 weeks, the people that you get to know, you really get to know them in a way that you wouldn't if you met them elsewhere and having dinner with them every night. And there was an older man I got to know from Switzerland, and he had just lost his wife like 2 weeks prior. And he just decided, I'm going to drown my sorrows by going on a cruise. So he and I were up till 5 a.m. chatting every night, drinking martinis. And like, when else would I be hanging out with an 89-year-old Swiss man? You know, like, it was, those kind of things were just really cool to step out of my element and experience something totally new.
That's great. And you know what? I wish more people had the courage to do something like that, you know?
I recommend it.
Yeah. Because, I mean, first of all, that's a pretty good fucking deal from what you just mentioned.
Right? Yeah, we can pass that up.
Yeah, no, that's great, actually. It's funny hearing that because we're going on a cruise in November in Egypt, so that's going to be quite fun. Yeah, I can't fucking wait. I've never been before. But the thing that you're mentioning, you know, with like getting to sit down and have dinner with people you've never met and getting to talk to them and stuff, a lot of people, you know, especially in Europe, that's a terrifying thought, you know? Yeah. No one would do that, especially, you know, people probably, you know, like some people listening to this podcast as well, you know, that's like, who like black metal and extreme metal, you know, we're kind of very introverted people.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, and that includes me, maybe not who I am now, because now I'm the kind of person I'll just start chatting to anyone, you know. That's why I have a podcast, you know. It's kind of like it becomes its own thing. But I would have been terrified of the idea in the past. But I think there's just so much value, you know, like we always say, oh, we're misanthropic or blah, 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 blah. But no, there's like a lot of really cool people that you get to meet, you know. You'll meet the odd person as well that you think, well, I don't relate to you. Going back to the very beginning, what you said, people who don't have special interests, I think that's kind of like where I draw the line, you know?
Yeah.
But outside of that, there are some people who've lived such interesting lives, they've got such interesting stories, you know? And it's like, you could really learn so much from everyone, you know? Even if you don't like someone, you can still talk to them and you can still learn something from them, you know? That's at least kind of how I approach things.
Absolutely. And it was just such an insight into all walks of life of the people that I met on that cruise, because, you know, if you've ever seen the movie Triangle of Sadness as well, which is just such an interesting commentary on social class, there was an element of that on this boat as well. Because, you know, when there are tickets available for 150 euros, there's plenty of people there like myself who never would have been able to afford a transatlantic cruise. But of course, there are also people who do this once a year, twice a year, and bring their whole family. And so it was, I think that trip in particular was a really interesting opportunity to kind of see these different lifestyles really meet in this one setting that is generally kind of reserved for upper classes and is really kind of a bougie situation. But then there were just people who had all kinds of life stories. And there was a family of Ukrainians, and there was maybe 30 people. And the family was all spread out all over the world after they had left Ukraine, and they had lost lots of family members. But they decided, okay, you know, we're all going to meet and we're going to go on this cruise together because they were able to, with their passports, to get to Guadeloupe and then come back to Italy. And so it was really interesting to see that as well. And it's not every day that you get to meet a family of 30 Ukrainian refugees who are able to take a transatlantic cruise together. So it was just such a really unique situation to be on a boat where there are people who could really be able to take that trip for peanuts, as well as the people who paid the 5,000 euros, which it would normally cost. So I'm really glad that I did that trip. That's something that I'm gonna keep with me for a long time.
That's amazing. I'm glad I asked you about that. That's pretty cool. Amazing. Yeah, I think there's just such a value to travel and things, you know. I think personally I kind of got lucky because I got to travel a lot from a very young age. And I also left my home country, you know, just around the time I was 17, you know, and I did that on my own, you know, came here just to play black metal, you know, which is you know, you could say, you know, like as an adult, if like a teenager my age, you know, if a 17-year-old now came to me and was like, hey, I'm thinking of moving out of my country and leaving my family and everyone to go start a black metal band in another country, do you recommend it? I'd be like, bro, go to fucking school. Like, what are you doing? You know? But obviously, I'm also a little bit of a kind of like, yeah, fuck it, go for it. You know? I'm a bit like that too, for sure. obviously. But yeah, it's just like cool. I think it's one of the best things you can do, especially, like in, especially when people are younger. I think traveling does so much to,
Absolutely.
develop your worldview in such a way. And that's not to say that, everything and everywhere is colorful and, all diversity is like amazing. No. But to see the world for what it truly is a real tool that you can have and use for the rest of your life, I think.
Yeah. And I was so lucky. My parents took my sister and I traveling a lot when we were kids. And like you said, not just to see the different colors of the world, but when I was 11, I went to Vietnam and Cambodia, and then we got to visit some of the villages there. And at the time, my family was doing like this World Vision sponsoring of a child there, and so. I mean, wow. Usually people just kind of like pay their $30 a month and don't really think of it. But my sister and I, we really like got this connection to this Cambodian child, and we were writing her letters and everything.
Oh, okay.
And we went to Cambodia and we got to meet her and visit her, which is like such a weird thing to do looking back. But that was such a amazing experience, and to kind of be able to see this from such a young age and to be able to feel like that the possibility is out there to be able to have these adventures and to be able to travel. And so I'm very grateful for my parents for that. And I think that on one hand, they appreciated it, but also regretted it when I left home when I was 17 and went traveling. I was like, okay, bye, I'm going to do this now. So
amazing. 17 and you just went traveling?
Yeah. So I went to Europe. I finished high school a year early. And then I went off to Europe with my boyfriend at the time, and we were just bumming around, hitchhiking back and forth, taking trains, staying in hostels, and
why not?
It was quite an adventure. It was quite an adventure back then. And I went back to Canada for a year to start university there. I was like, nah, it's not for me. So I moved right back to Europe, and then I've pretty much been here since.
That's incredible. And you said you've been to Germany and also obviously Sweden now, yeah?
Yeah. So I lived in Germany for 5 years, first when I moved to Europe. And, apart from Canada, like I would say that Germany, I really made a home there. And that's kind of I still think of it as my base. It's where I became an adult and learned how to live in the world. So it's always going to be an important place in my life.
That's incredible. Yeah, I mean, obviously it does so much, really, and I suppose that kind of mindset probably helps you a lot now as well with what you do with with your work, basically.
Absolutely. And when I was in university studying linguistics and intercultural communication, it was kind of like, what are you really going to do with this degree? And most people who studied, they either went to work for the government, or they continued in academia, or they went into law. But I really used the things that I learned in university every single day. Like this tour that we just finished, we had a band from France, and then our drivers were Germans. So I was speaking French and German and English and all of these things that I learned in university. It was not a second wasted. So if you could ever get the most out of a Bachelor of Arts, I certainly have done it now in my line of work.
That's incredible, because you never hear that. Exactly. That's such a rare thing. Yeah. Oh, I mean, it's refreshing to hear. I'm glad that it worked out that way, and I suppose that is something that would be useful. And you never know, it's not even always just the music industry, but that's the sort of skill that can even work out really well, even in corporate positions. Not saying that's necessarily your ambition. I don't know that, but I'm just saying it's something that's extremely useful in today's world.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, it's undervalued, but the thing is, we have this phenomenon in Canada where it's a highly educated population, where everybody kind of feels this pressure to go get a bachelor's degree, and then now it's pressure to get a master's degree. I think that's changing a little bit, because especially in Canada, when a university degree is so expensive, and like in the US, and you put yourself in debt for it. I was very lucky that I went to Germany, and Germany offers free education for foreigners as well. So if you're able to learn German, then you can study for free. And this is just this was an absolute life changer for me to really be able to see and integrate into Germany and the culture there, and be there as a student and meet other students and do the full degree there as well. And the flexibility of German university, like, I will always be so grateful for this program and the setup, and that people can go there for free. Like, it is such an asset that Germany has to attract international students, but such a benefit to the students as well to have that opportunity to go there.
That's super important, because the education thing is just so unbalanced all across the world, generally speaking, and what do I mean by that is, where I come from in Iran, you have to have at the very bare minimum a diploma, and even then a diploma is not considered much, so you need to have a university degree. And it's just something that's ingrained in our culture, like if you, and it's not like if you don't have one, then you got to go and start your own business and stuff. No, that doesn't exist the same way that it does over here. It's very weird how opposite it is. But for example, in Iran, if you, as a guy, for example, if you don't get like a university degree, you're basically like the male lion that got, expelled from the tribe, and he has to leave with his tail tucked between his legs. And now you got to go do some construction work, and construction work over there is like less than minimum wage, which is just absurd. Over here, if you go to university, then you're in debt, and then no one hires you for a job. But instead, if without any education you still start your own business, or like, I don't know, start plumbing or doing an apprenticeship, you can actually make a lot of money doing that. So it's very weirdly kind of like opposite ends of the spectrum,
Absolutely. And I think that the tables have turned a lot in the last 10 years since I was in university, that now even in Canada and the US, people are really starting to realize, is it really worth all that money, and what do you get out of it? I mean, you're hardly employable after just a bachelor's degree, especially a bachelor in cultural studies and linguistics. But
nice flex.
Yeah. But no, I mean, it's really difficult to find work in those fields. And Canada is the most highly educated, underemployed country in the world. So they have the highest unemployment amongst people with the highest education. So there's tons of people with university degrees but aren't getting jobs, because people are so encouraged to go and study something, anything, whether it's kind of this fluff social sciences, but there's no jobs in that industry. So I think it's really come around a lot, and there's a lot more prestige now on other lines of work and working in trades, which I think is a really good transition away from kind of the ivory tower university attitude. And I think I'm one of the few people, like you were saying, that I feel like my degree wasn't wasted, and I'm lucky that it was provided by the German state, and I'm lucky that I can use it now, because if I wasn't in this line of work, I definitely loved what I was studying, but it certainly wouldn't make me employable. So I was really, when I went back to university, it was really more as a passion and as a hobby than thinking that it was going to get me a job.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you kind of need both, don't you? It's like almost like a process of alchemy, like where you've got your passion mixed with skill, and then if you just have a little bit of luck, the right connections, and then you got the three of them together, then boom, everything just kind of works out. Exactly. But so many people tend to at least lack one of the three of those necessary items in that alchemical process,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So to me, I think, what's also really important for a lot of people is you also can't compare yourself to others as well, Like you might be doing exceptionally well, compared to like where you came from and stuff. But then if you like look at someone else and then say, oh, that other agent, they're working with Metallica, like how dare they, like I could be doing that. And it's like stuff like that, it's great to be ambitious. And I'm not saying that you would necessarily think that, or you would say something like that. Not at all. But it's like it's a very normal human thing to do and think that way, And this is maybe more like a reminder, not even for the listeners, but for myself, I'm talking to myself here, but I think sometimes it's important to just kind of realize that, your competition is with yourself. Look at how far you came from 10, 15 years ago, as opposed to like looking at someone else's journey and then comparing that,
Yeah. No, and that's a really important thing that I've learned in my career as well, is that competition in this business is really not going to help anyone, because at the end of the day, we're collaborating, we're not competing. It doesn't work like that. Like, I'm not competing with another agent to sign this band, or I mean, if the other band feels like the other agency is better for them, then that's probably the case. And the bands that feel like I'm best for them, then they're going to come to me. And at the end of the day, we all want to work together to make kick-ass fucking shows. And so I'm not against these guys. We're all in this together, and we all have the same goal. So collaborating with my colleagues is the most important thing. So you're absolutely right. Like, it serves nothing to look at someone else and say, oh, I wish I was doing what they were doing, because I'm doing things that I never imagined that I would be doing. If I went back and talked to my 16-year-old self sitting in the car outside of the school listening to black metal, be like, hey, you're going to do this one day. I mean, that's enough for me. I don't need to be Metallica's agent. Like, that's fine.
No, that's a beautiful mindset. I'm a big fan of that school of thought in general, and I think that another thing to just generally keep in mind as well, is that in the music industry, especially in extreme metal, as I kind of alluded to earlier, we're like fighting over little breadcrumbs anyway, so it's not like, so it's not like there's this crazy thing, and one thing to keep in mind is like, this is more maybe for the musicians, but it's like someone else's stream numbers don't take away from your stream numbers,
Exactly.
or like ticket sales or whatever. Like there's still you've connected with those number of people, and you can cherish that connection, instead of taking away from it. The famous quote, comparison is the thief of joy. I think that's extremely applicable here, and you got to understand, if you're friends with someone, or if you know another band who's now doing better and then they're touring bigger, that means that the genre is growing, and that's good for everyone, so the competition, it can be competition so long as you actually look at it in maybe perhaps more of a positive light, that, okay, they're doing better. Good for them. I want to do better too. That's maybe, I think, the more right mindset to go about it.
Yeah. And, we have so much to learn from each other as well. And I really don't like some of the kind of gatekeeping attitudes that can exist in the community as well. Like, if somebody calls me up and they say, which is what happened recently too, somebody got in contact, they said, hey, I want to learn how to be a tour manager. Can you help me? And I brought this young woman along on the last tour. And it was a little bit too busy to show her everything that I would have wanted to show her. But, I'm very happy to do that. If I felt like there wasn't enough work to go around, that's not the case. Your clients will come back to you if they like the work that you do. And it's important to have other people out there who also do a good job. I mean, people are only going to benefit from having other good tour managers out there. So I am more than happy to show other people who are interested and willing to learn, to show them the ropes and bring them along. And I don't love it when I see this attitude of, I'm not going to tell you my secrets or pass along this contact because this belongs to me. I mean, like, we're all here for the passion, this isn't Wall Street. Like, we're doing this for the community and we're doing this for the music. So we just have to remind ourselves of that at the end of the day.
That's such a great mindset. I love hearing that, I think that's so important, because you can imagine how much that would have perhaps meant to you, when you were, say, like 16, 17 years old, and then if you approach someone like that and they're like, yeah, sure, come on, and then I'll show you how things work, and you can just watch it, because what that's like, especially that first feeling of like being backstage somewhere for the first time with like a VIP pass, like it's something that maybe you get accustomed to it over time, but if you think back of like the first time when you're there and then it's like, oh my God, like I don't have to go past security to touch these people.
Exactly. Like, there's that veil, it's a whole new world.
Yeah, it is. It is very exciting, actually. You know, I kind of try and remind myself not to kind of forget that feeling. You know, like I don't care. I don't care enough about looking cool. You know, it's like whatever. You know, just like wear the heart on the sleeve. It's like fuck whatever. You know, if I get excited about being around certain musicians or being in a certain environment, fuck yeah. You know, I'm gonna show it. No problem.
Yeah.
And because also the fact that you've earned your position for being there too. You know. So it's not like someone just opened the door and you just waltz straight in. You know, you've had to really work hard to even have those connections and things.
Yeah, and that's the thing, and that's why I think that mentorship is so important as well in this. I mean, when I started out, I kind of made a lot of these connections by coincidence, and then I got these opportunities. I worked hard. I proved what I could do. And I found myself in a position where Mayhem was calling me and asking me to work with them much more quickly than I expected my career to escalate to that level. And the Mayhem manager, Cloutier, he has been fantastic in really teaching me about the business. And I didn't even realize how much I needed a mentor, but he has been really, really great with that. And that's something that I'm always going to be grateful for as well. So that's something that I absolutely want to pay forward as well, to find other people who, I mean, there's plenty of people who already proved their worth and showed their chops, but I mean, you can always get a little bit higher by taking the advice of people more experienced than yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And in the case of Turo, I mean, he's someone who's been responsible for, at the very least, like the production of probably hundreds of shows at this point, you know, and this is not even looking at the countless number of really like important classic albums in extreme metal, I would say. Yeah, so yeah, I can definitely imagine there being a thing for that. Just to your point as well about the girl that you mentioned, you know, I'm very much, as I've gotten older, especially, I try and be an anti-gatekeeper, you know. You know, one example of it was, I hope he doesn't mind me mentioning this, but there was this gentleman from India, actually. And after my episode with Tom G. Warrior came out, he messaged me and asked me, was like, do you know if there's any way I can, you know, we never spoke before that, you know, but he messaged me super polite and everything. And he just said to me, I've got this artwork. Is there any way you can maybe connect me with him, and then I can get this to him? And I obviously had two choices of either going, nah, you know, like who you know, just because I had a guest on my show, whatever. But I was like, I when I read his message, I was like, yeah, fuck it, you know, like why not, you know?
Yeah.
So it happened, and then he got his artwork to him, you know, and then turns out this guy, you know, so he was obviously grateful for that, you know. And to me, I was like, you know, all I had to do was just kind of move out of your way and just send a couple of text messages, and then it got sorted out, you know. That's all it took, you know. It's like it's nothing off my back, but you know, it turns out this guy's actually a really great artist, you know, and looks like we might actually be collaborating on some stuff together now, you know, which is kind of like, that's cool, you know. It's kind of like, you know, you don't necessarily do stuff because you want to take things, you want to get something out of it. Sometimes you just like, you know, all you got to do is just not block the way for other people, you know. And it's like amazing things will happen, not just for them, but maybe for you too, you know. So it's kind of like, I like to kind of put that plant that positive seed of thinking in people's heads sometimes, you know.
No,
it's
absolutely. Good. And I notice there can often be this attitude, particularly in the States, of, I guess in Swedish translated it would be kiss up and kick down, where everybody's trying to climb, and anybody below you, you're trying to get them out of your way. But once again, that's not what we're here for. You know, there's so many talented people around, and the nature of this industry is that the good ones will stick around and the not so good ones are gonna fall by the wayside. So we don't have to do anything with it. You know, it's natural selection. Like the people who are meant to stay, they're gonna stay, and the people who are not, they're not gonna last. So I mean, there's no point in kicking down or kissing up, because all you have is your own merits, and you just have to keep working hard and maintain good relationships, and that's all you can do, really.
Yeah, time is your superpower and consistency is your bullets.
It's true.
Yeah. There we go. Holy shit, I only just came up with that. I hope you don't mind me just dropping that there. Yeah.
Put it on a t-shirt.
Yeah, might get it tattooed on the inside of my arm. But that's amazing. So if you just want to maybe quickly just tell us, what's kind of the goals for Cult of Chaos at this point? What is it that you kind of got coming up? Any kind of particular further ambitions that maybe you care to share with the company?
Yeah, so this weekend, actually, we have our very first Chaos Fest in Stockholm, which is really exciting. I'm coming out of retirement as a promoter since I was 14. That was the last time I promoted a show.
Amazing.
So, it's going to be super fun. It's a killer lineup, and everybody there, they're either on my roster or close colleagues, close friends. So it's going to be really fun. Tickets are selling well. So yeah, I'm a little surprised we were able to make this event come together with all the other things I had on my plate, but it's just a few days away and everything's good to go. So it's going to be a really good one. And then we announced our second edition as well with other bands from the Cult of Chaos bookings roster end of May. So what we really wanted to do here, about a year ago, I was approached by this local venue in Stockholm, and they said that they really wanted to kind of do more with black metal, and they just emailed me out of the blue. And so what we're working on is to kind of create this festival series, because the market is so saturated with weekend-long festivals, or in the case of some festivals, it's 4 or 5 days long.
Sure.
And honestly, I think I speak for a few people where it's just not feasible or super interesting to go somewhere and drink for 3 days on end and stay in a tent, but you still kind of want to have this vibe of a reoccurring event that kind of builds this momentum in this family, like lots of festivals have. So the idea was kind of to combine club shows with a festival brand to create regular events of Chaos Fest that we're going to do 3 or 4 times a year. It's not going to be like an extreme bill of 17 bands in one night, but we also want to integrate a lot more cultural events and panel discussions. And I'm really inspired at what Inferno is doing and what Beyond the Gates is doing. But once again, this is a huge production, and you're in it for the entire weekend, and you're there. Which is awesome, but it's also nice for somebody who kind of wants to have this feeling and kind of a community gathering point just on a Saturday night without having to dedicate a whole weekend to it. So in collaboration with Kollektivet Livet in Stockholm, we're working on this together. So Saturday is a test run, and then after that, we're going to kind of see where it goes from there and just expand on that. But aside from that, it's all really a juggling act right now. I've taken on a couple new clients in the last few months, and so Mayhem was already taking 110% of my time. So now I have I have to slice the pie up a little differently. But yeah, we're expanding now. I'm bringing in more people to join the team, and so I think that's the only way forward from here is to expand in that sense. And to really find the right people who can cover all the bases to keep this growing. I mean, the main thing that I want to do is just keep bands on the road. I mean, the odds are stacked against us. The economics of touring, everybody knows it's a nightmare. So it really takes a lot of work and dedication to navigate that world. And I really want to do that for the artists I love, to be able to put them on stage to be able to create these community gathering spots and to make sure that shows can continue into the future. So yeah, that's the goal right now. That's what I'm working on.
That's amazing. Fair play to you. Yeah, that's great. It's great that you're taking the initiative to do all of this stuff, even on top of everything else that you do. I commend you for that. Absolutely. And so who is it that's playing on this edition of the festival?
So we have Tormentor as headliner.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
nice.
So that's going to be super fun. I don't think they've ever been to Stockholm, at least not in a very, very long time. And then we have Tiran, Hometown Boys, which is really fun because this is kind of like it's really the perfect lineup, because especially in Stockholm, you know, the black metal world is really separate from the heavy metal world, and there's no other band that could tie it together other than Tormentor. So we're going to have lots of black metal people there, lots of old school heavy metal people there, and it's just going to kind of be this big gathering. And then as support, we have Svartkonst, which is they're really great up and coming guys from north of Sweden. And I've been working with them for a couple of years now, and their trajectory is really impressive. So that means
black art, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Black art. Yeah. So they also kind of have this this heavy metal, black metal vibe. So I think it's going to be a really good bill. And we have Alex and Ida tattooing there. I know that you interviewed them a while back.
Yeah, they're good friends of mine. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So it's going to feel like kind of a family gathering. And after we had the Mayhem and Morbid show last month, that was just a fantastic night. And that was, I worked really hard to make that happen as well. And that really kind of showed me the potential of the Stockholm metal scene, which when I first moved here, I was a little worried about. It wasn't what I expected. And especially in the pandemic, you know, it was really, really lacking these events and these community gathering spots. But we really felt the electricity in the air at the Mayhem and Morbid show, and hoping to get that again this Saturday. So I think it'll be a good one.
Amazing. And I've actually just seen Morbid in London just this Saturday. Oh my God, man. That was a hell of a fucking show. But I can imagine seeing them in Mayhem would have been even better. That sounds... Yeah, that sounds like a hell of a fucking night. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just a historic bill. It was something that needed to happen. And, you know, like if you had asked me when I was 15, 16 years old, okay, if you could see one lineup, what would it be? That's definitely one that I would have said. So it was very cool to get to be a part of that and make that happen.
Yeah, it's a much better kind of M&Ms. Sorry, that's probably not. That's amazing. Also, speaking
black metal.
Yes, that's it. Different kind of nuts.
Yeah.
But that's great. So on the second edition of the festival as well, I just kind of quickly want to give shout out. You've got Mefarash playing that one, right?
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. I love Eric. He's like a brother. You know, him and I are very like-minded. You know, and I consider him a good friend. And he's been on here before, but I need to get him back on at some point.
Yeah.
Great band. You know, obviously, you know, lots of artistic things. So that's great. You know, I can only recommend people to come and check this out. You know, I'm sure they're probably already intrigued enough. If they weren't yet, you know, I couldn't recommend them to come and check out Cult of Chaos anymore, or Chaos Fest rather, for the festival itself.
Absolutely. And keep an eye out, because it's just going to keep growing, and we have lots of cool things on the horizon. So yeah, I hope that is going to just get bigger and better with every edition we do.
Amazing. Well, Kit, I just want to say thank you so much for your time and for jumping on Iblis Manifestations. I admire your hard work and obviously how much time and effort you put into everything that you do. It's people like you that are the fabric that's holding this scene and this music thing together. So I just want to say thank you for that as a member of it.
Thank you. And thank you for everything you're doing. It's been a real pleasure to chat with you.
Absolutely. I will link everyone in the description of everything that you're doing so they can come and check out your work. And to everyone who's been listening to the podcast so far, hope you guys enjoyed this one. Support the fuck out of Cult of Chaos, and we'll see you on the next episode.